I'm Matt Cinnamon down here at Estevan Fire and Rescue Fire Hall with the man himself, Fire Chief Dale Feser. Thanks for joining me.
Matt, how you doing today?
I'm not too bad. How's yourself?
Not bad at all.
Pretty big day for you guys. You got this brand new yet very old fire truck. Let's just start by how you guys came across acquiring this.
Well, actually, this was actually a fire truck that was in service here for our fire department for a number of years. And it was in secondary usage and then storage at the fire station. And as the fire station grew, expanded, and evolved, there wasn't enough room at the old fire hall to maintain that and provide a space for it. So it was actually a memorandum of understanding was established with the Sewers Valley Museum, in which that they put it on display for that time. However, the city of Estevan retained ownership. So once the new fire station came about and we had the showroom area to display it, we went around through the process about recovering the fire engine and bringing it back so we can display it proudly here at its home.
Special day for you guys. Tell us a bit about the truck itself, kind of some of what it was able to offer in its day, and what you guys hope to see from it now.
Well, in this day, actually, when it was actually put into service, this is a 1928 American LaFrance fire truck. So in 1928, there wasn't a lot of amenities. As you can see just over here, this particular apparatus was a 12-person pull cart that was built in 1914. So you fast forward a few years to what we're dealing with here now, there was a huge technological advancement into firefighting operations in the fire service. So for the city of Estevan to actually get a motorized fire truck, that was just something that was just unbelievable. So really helped out with fire suppression operations, carrying a little bit more water, better pumping capabilities, as there was a mechanical pump on this, where the older unit has actually relied on air pressure as an expellent gas to push the water out in a very limited water supply. So this actually afforded us the opportunity to tie into the city's infrastructure via the water hydrant, so we had a self-sustaining water supply at all times for extended fire suppression operations. When you take a look at the truck, when you see what you see on here, this is the original wood frame ladder. All the ladders were wood frame back in that day. This was actually just an extension ladder. Probably this one's a 24-foot, and then just behind it is another ladder, which was a roof ladder, or they could just use it for a single-stage ladder as well. Some of the other things that were used on here, if you take a look at some of the nozzles, smooth-bore nozzles, very, very heavy, all brass. So it definitely took a lot just to hang on to these nozzles. We got leather handles and straps on here. So again, these are all the nozzles that originally were in service on this particular truck. This is what's called a soda ash fire extinguisher. This is an inverting style fire extinguisher that actually is no longer allowed to be used in service nowadays. But essentially what you would do is just invert the fire extinguisher and all of the expellant would come out. Unfortunately, the hose is no longer on the back side here, but the conventional hose like you would normally see on an updated fire extinguisher. A lot of the amenities on this truck as well was all mounted on the exterior, as there's no cabinets like you would see on a modern fire truck. So we had the axes mounted on the exterior. We had some lighting that would assist us in various different types of operations. So the lighting you can see very big, it's very bulky. So you can imagine the firefighters going in there, carrying a hose, carrying an axe, and you're trying to hang on to this big light. The reason why the big hook is in place here too is if it's needed, it actually can hook around the rung of a ladder so that we can illuminate whatever the firefighter or the fire department happened to be working on at the time. Some of the older style hose that was used typically back in the day, threaded connections were still being used back when this truck was in service. This is a single jacket canvas back hose. Very, and it's still canvas hose that we use nowadays. It's something that is resilient to a lot of the cuts and tears and abrasions that we'd normally see out working on a scene. However, we do have to watch it because make sure it's cleaned and laundered properly before it gets put back into service because it's susceptible to mold and mildew. Another older style fire extinguisher that was used here, basically it's just like a pump style fire extinguisher. So these types of items, the extinguishers that are in a truck, would be used in small fire situations that they would see back in the day, such as a chimney fire or fireplace fire or some of the smaller things. So when you advance up to here, this is where connections were to the pump. So a very rudimentary pump system in here. You could actually run 2 hoses at a time, but that was it. This is where our intake valve is. That's what would hook up to the hydrant of the day. So it would take in water through this and supply the pump with water. It would pressurize the water, and then it would be discharged out of these 2 ports here to an actual fire suppression stream. This is what's called a Siamese valve. So this actually hooks up to here, so where you can actually hook in 2 hoses at the same time, so you can get water supply from 2 different hydrants if need be, or from another truck itself. So we take a look again. It's very rudimentary, very open cab. We talked to a lot of our retired firefighters that actually operated this truck too while they were still serving members, and telling us lots of stories of driving this thing to Beanfate and Benson areas and Hitchcock and all these outlying areas. And it was, let's say, less than savory for the weather conditions. It wasn't uncommon to go out and fight these fires when it was about, minus 30, minus 20, and they're bombing down the road in this thing, and you can just imagine how cold it was. Not a lot of room for firefighters on here. You typically had your engineer or your driver, as well as your officer, which would be a captain or a lieutenant at that time, who's the boss of the truck. But not a lot of room for other firefighters. So back in the day, the firefighters actually rode on the tailboard section, which would typically accommodate 3 to 4 firefighters. It's not an acceptable practice nowadays, but back in those days, that was a very acceptable practice, and the only way that you could transport the manpower with the fire truck to the scene in a safe manner. So what you see here as well is just basically opening up the engine compartment here, taking a look at the American La France. It's a straight 6-cylinder engine. This is what we're going to be working on here in the next little while to see if we can get into a road running state here, so that way we'll be able to utilize this truck in parade events and whatnot as well, and a few other PR engagements. And some of the stuff has been retrofitted, some of the sirens and whatnot. It's just basically trying to evolve the truck, as back in those days too, there wasn't a lot of budgetary means, so you did a lot of retrofits to your existing equipment and apparatus to make sure that you're meeting current needs for safety and fire code standards. One of the few of the unique items that are on the truck here as well is we still have the old school. Of course, you don't see any lights on here for as far as emergency warning lights. So this is one of the first emergency warning lights that were actually put on there. We also have air horns, and we also have the bell, which the officer would ring as the operator is driving it down the road. So kind of a very unique item to that particular era of the fire service. And of course, you have an exterior mounted fuel tank that's right behind the operators. So you definitely don't see that anymore, but we're very, very happy to have this back into our fleet and back into our home. We look forward to seeing a lot of members of the public. It's amazing how many people have already seen the truck. It's only been in here for less than a week, and people are just coming in. They want to see it. It's amazing that they show that much interest in fire service history. You take a look just above the steering wheel onto the dash there. There's a huge spotlight that is typical of that time and time period as well. So that way, again, it's helping to illuminate the scene, especially when you're responding to typical emergencies after dark.
And I'm sure the question that is very pressing and we're all wondering, do the bells and whistles work?
The bells and whistles do not currently work right now because we do have the batteries disconnected off of here. So we do have to find some specialized batteries to hook it up. And I have no doubt that it will work. So the sirens and whistles don't work, but the bell does. So we can come around this side here. And then actually this is how the operator would run down the road. And then the captain or the lieutenant, so that's how you would warn people that the fire truck was coming down the road.
I feel important now. Get out of my way.
So on this side of the truck here, obviously, is once it actually got to the fire scene, this is where all the pump gearing mechanisms are. The driver would come off, the captain would come off, or officer would come off, and he would delegate duties and start doing on-scene operations. The driver would come around here after it was put into gear, and then he'd actually engage the pump over here. This is a throttle control that actually runs and is tied into the engine here. So once they're ready to start pumping water, this is how he would increase water pressure by just adding a little more throttle control. Back over here is the main pump pressure gauges. These are the original gauges that came with the fire truck yet as well. So that would tell the pump operator how much pressure he'd have on each line. Now again, a very basic rudimentary mechanical pump here, so we don't have a lot of the amenities on today's pumps, such as that pressure relief valve. So the guys had to be very cognitive of what they were doing on scene, because if you had 120 psi on your line and you just closed the nozzle, all of a sudden that guy would get all the additional pressure. So you definitely have to make sure that you're communicating. Heaven forbid you were working off a ladder or something like that. So, and this here is actually suction lines. So if we're drawing water from a static water source, that's what we'd be hooking up to draw water, say, out of a slough or a dugout or whatever the case may be. Yep.
Fantastic. And I guess one final question. People can come anytime and see it?
By all means, we're open Monday to Friday, 8 to 12, 1 till 4:30. We are definitely more than welcome to accommodate anybody who wants to stop by for a visit and have take a look at our little display area. We're going to see some other antiquities that are going to be on display here as well as we go through it. We got some turnout gear that was typical of wearing in anywhere from the 30s up to the 70s until there was a huge change in personal protective equipment that firefighters wore. So we're going to start bringing out more of that, put that on display so people can actually understand the evolution of the fire service.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir, for the tour.
Not a problem. Thank you.
From the Souris Valley Museum now to the Estevan Fire Hall. Come on down and check it out anytime. For Discover Estevan, I'm Matt Cinnamon.